Cut.
Do you like games? I like games too. I like games too.
There are malls, well, there are stores in Francisco Ruiz asks, are there malls in SR4 for you to shop in? Yes, there are. I'm not going to do any shopping today. I have settled on a wardrobe for my protagonist that I like. And as a guy, these games can be, you know, if you spend too much time, if you're playing a female hero like I am, and you spend too much time trying on different outfits, at least for me, I was like, this is not good for me, you know, because you can cycle through some kind of skimpy stuff, and you know, you might say it's just a video game and stuff like that. It still has an effect. It's still, whether it's comic books or a cartoon or a video game, it can still put in your head ideas and images and standards that it's unfair to hold women to, and create appetites that end up objectifying the women that we ought to be loving and cherishing as princesses of the kingdom. And so for that reason, actually, there was a while when I first started getting into these games where I got away from Saints Row 3. I was like, no. You know, it was kind of borderline. I mean, it wasn't like I didn't feel like a really strong conviction, but it was close enough that I was like, I think this might not be good for me. And so I put it away for a while, but didn't get rid of it. And then I ended up coming back to it months later, and I haven't had really the same problem since. I think sometimes, like when I'm watching a movie and there'll be some kind of like bit of sexiness or whatever, not necessarily nudity or whatever, but something that, you know, somebody that's dressed kind of skimpy. The first time through, I'm kind of like I'm more uncomfortable than times following that, because at that time I don't know how far they're going to take it or what the experience is going to be like, and so I'm more on edge and like I'm uncertain and stuff. And then I'll watch it again later. I'm like, oh, you know, it's either easy to put in my peripheral, or it just, you know, it's not adding to my visual rolodex. There's a great book that Holly and I read. We try to not always, but we have lunch once a week, and oftentimes over the years we've been doing this since we've been married. We'll read a book together, usually about marriage and stuff like that, understanding how men and women are different, how they work and stuff like that. And one of the book we most recently read that specifically had to do with, you know, marriage relationships and stuff like that, and how men and women are wired. It used the comparison of a visual Rolodex, and how it is so easy for men to just kind of store images, whether it's, you know, some image of pornography you saw, you know, 2 decades ago or whatever, or something from a movie or from the cover of a magazine or something like that. It can get added to the visual Rolodex so quickly, and it can be called up intentionally or unintentionally. It'll just pop back into your mind, you know. So you just kind of have to kind of get to know what your triggers are, and then with both Saints Row 3 and Saints Row 4, I settled into really quickly a wardrobe with this character that I like thematically. It's what I wanted to do with her thematically. I just turned the audio off because she just said the word for feces that a lot of people don't like to hear. But yeah, so she's modeled after kind of like Trinity is kind of the idea there. Trinity from the Matrix, and then you know, a little bit of Neo too, so like a female version of Neo and kind of Trinity and stuff. And you might be asking yourself, well, Peter, why go with a female protagonist, you know, at all? This was not the first, but one of the first games that I ever used a female protagonist. I think Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning might have been the first one that I tried a female protagonist in. And I've tried them both first person and third person. And first person is weird. It doesn't work for me for some reason. In my second playthrough now of Skyrim on the special edition, I used a female protagonist, and I'm in first person all the time. And so I get surprised sometimes. I'm like in the middle of fighting, and I'll hear this woman's grunt, and I'll be like, oh, that's right, I'm playing a woman, you know. And so it's weird because I think in first person games, it's, even though I don't go into them for the role play or the story, for some reason it is a little bit weird for me. It's not that I think of myself as the character, but it's weird to be in the driver's seat in that sense, zoomed in and in the body of, if you will. I don't know. It's not that it feels icky and like, oh, this feels forbidden and weird, and you know, it's nothing like that. It's just, I don't know. It's just like, oh, this is weird, not what I expected. But when I'm playing a female protagonist in third person, it feels more like it's her story. And the reason that I like doing a female protagonist in Saints Row is because she is, whether you choose a male or female, and you have multiple voices you can choose from, they use the same script for her. And you're a gang leader, and so you're like a tough-talking, you know, street-savvy gang leader, and and it's a very kind of crass and, you know, all that kind of stuff character. And I just found it really funny to, like, when I was just trying out the voices, you know, to hear the things that were coming out of her mouth that sounds so like, I'm going to say locker room talk, but not necessarily in the sense of, like, you know, sexual language all the time, but just kind of like that tough talking, you know, and if I left the audio on, you'd hear a little bit of it, and it's funny to me. She'll go like, yeah, you know, stuff that you just typically don't hear women say in that way, you know, or anything like that. And so I was like, wow, this is a lot more interesting than just some dude, you know, who's trying to be tough and stuff like that. It was a lot more funny and interesting to have a female voice doing it. So anyway, and I should say this, if you're not familiar with these games, I definitely do not recommend. They're a game that's hard for me to recommend to anybody, because, you know, as Christians, we are not supposed to be telling jokes that are crass, and we're not supposed to be talking about, you know, a lot of crass jokes. The meaning, if you look at, like, and the scripture verse is not mine. I feel like I covered this in a video that I did once, so maybe you can hunt through my videos. And but when scripture talks about crass joking and coarse humor and stuff, and saying these things are not for you, it's talking, if memory serves correctly, specifically about language that is designed to stimulate lust, or in other words, maybe we could say language that reduces sexuality to this purely superficial, base pleasure, as opposed to being an act of love and an act of union between husband and wife, you know. And so that's why we are not meant to talk about sex in that way. But I don't think there's a prohibition against us hearing other people do that, you know, like throwing a conversation going, okay, gotta go right now, and stuff like that, you know. And I think there's also times where we can laugh at that humor and not be validating that view of sexuality. And the example I would give would be, I really enjoy the comedy of Tenacious D. And what's funny about that to me, I mean, it's very crass humor, very, I guess, lewd, you might say. What's funny to me is not actually what they're saying, but it's that they think that talking like that makes them cool and like these legendary rockers, and it's this very kind of like childish, bizarrely childish view of reality and their own self-worth and stuff, and it's endearing because they're so naive. They do it in a way that's naive. I don't like stand-up comedians who will just go and use really crass language to talk about sex in ways like that. Isn't, you know, they're talking tough and stuff like that because it's a different context. When these guys from Tenacious D do it, they're playing these characters that, like, they're still acting like little kids who think that that's what adults are supposed to be like when they're cool and when they're in command of life and stuff like that. And so there's something weird and endearing and bizarre about it. And so it's in a similar way, there are sometimes jokes in here that will have the same effect on me. Other times, in fact, many other times in this game, it's just like, all right, I shrug and and it's just like, whatever, you know, that's not funny. But it's not causing me to incorporate that view of sexuality, you know, into my mind. Can anybody name that? You guys know what you know what that was? Oh no, I'm gonna miss him. That's cool, though. Tell me that's not cool. And if you do tell me, you're wrong again. That is very cool. You're wasting your breath if you tell me that's not cool. Boom, mother trucker! Okay, nobody's getting that song reference, so I guess I'll tell you. That was the theme from the early 90s Flash TV show with John Wesley Shipp, who plays Barry Allen's father in the current TV show. Oh, that feels good. There is actually a costume. I totally forgot about it, but when I was prepping for the stream, I considered using it for today. But there's a costume that you can get that if you customize the colors for it, it looks almost identical to the Wonder Woman costume. And I really thought about doing that, but I thought, no, I don't want to do that, just in case that could be a trigger to. That's the that's the point of caution for me when I'm playing as a female character in a third-person game, spending hours and hours, dozens of hours of a game looking at a perfectly chiseled female bottom. That's not doing anything good for me.